I'm so sorry because I missed a video for you last week. However, it has been like one of the most insane weeks of my life. All good things. It wasn't good all the time, but it came together, and it just, when you like manifest the shit out of something, I promise you, if you stick it out when you are at your lowest point, like your lowest of lows, it will come together if you fight for what you want. Yes. Okay, with that said, today's video is kind of all over the place, so I'm just trying to like give you guys something, especially after this week of missing another video. But after this week, things will be back on track. I have a new space now. I'm not in it right now, but I do have a new space, and it's beautiful, and I can't wait to show you. So lots of really exciting things. But today's video, we're almost in Halloween, so I'm sharing like fun horror stuff, like horror, my favorite horror films, favorite horror books, and lots of just like bopping around New York City just for funsies. I think I want to give you guys more city content because I think it's fun and it's beautiful, and I have so many creative ideas to actually like intentionally film stuff around, especially in bookstores and libraries and places that I think you would love as much as I do. So anyways, today's video, like I said, is chaotic, and I'm sorry, but next week we'll be back on schedule and I'll show you guys my new space as well. And yeah, Halloween's on Friday, so happy early Halloween, and I hope you enjoy. It's almost Halloween, and horror is probably one of my favorite genres in all artistic mediums, for films, books, everything. Horror, gothic lit, all of that stuff. And so I wanted to talk about some of my favorite horror books as well as some of my favorite horror films, and then also some perfumes to wear on Halloween night. But I want to start with books first. So I have a few here. It was very difficult for me to narrow down like 5 because I feel like I could talk for hours about how many horror books that I think are perfect, not only just for the season, but just in general. But I really wanted to just make it a short, tight, concise list for you to choose from. And then I have another book that's kind of like literature adjacent that I think you guys would really love. And I'm actually going to start with that one, and that is The House of Psychotic Women, which is a film book. It's technically like a film memoir, but it kind of reads like horror literature. The author of this book really uses horror movies, especially ones about women on the verge of madness, to really unpack her own life. It just talks about like female horror, female hysteria. It talks about the film Possession and just so many other incredible horror films. And it's just really like a mirror for a woman's psyche and how watching pain can feel like self-recognition. So if you like or love horror that kind of blurs into autobiography, this just kind of feels like stepping into someone's mind while maybe they're on the verge of madness. I want to try and show you some pictures. It's really awkward to kind of hold this and flip through it, but I'm skipping ahead. I don't know where I'm at, but hopefully it kind of gives you an idea of like what all is inside this book. I don't know, it's incredible. I think it also just makes a really cool coffee table book in general. So yeah, highly recommend. Also, this cover is just stunning. I kind of want it as like a poster on my wall. Okay, Maldador by L'Entremont. I actually did a full TikTok video of this. People seem to really be interested in it, so I think that you guys might be too. And this one is just like a pure nightmare. And not because of the gore, but because of how completely deranged and visionary it is. Maldador is very much a surreal prose poem written in the 1800s about a man who rebels against God and embraces evil as a kind of art form. And it's just filled with grotesque imagery and bizarre transformations and this blasphemous beauty. And there's no real plot. It's just very much a fever dream, like feverish monologues that kind of read like the subconscious of something that is not entirely human. It's one of those books that influenced a lot of surrealist art and existentialists and basically every writer who ever wanted to tear language apart. Okay, Perfume by Patrick Susskind. This is one of my favorite horror books of all time because it's so sensory. It follows Jean-Baptiste Grenouille, who is a man who was born in the 18th century France, and he has no scent of his own, but he very much possesses this like extraordinary sense of smell, and he becomes obsessed with capturing the perfect scent. And when he discovers that the smell of a young woman is the purest of all, he really like goes psychotic and begins killing them to distill their essence into a perfume. Susskind really describes everything, like the decay of Paris, the sweat, the flowers, the skin, in such lush detail that it's so intoxicating and disgusting. It's a story about like obsession and beauty and what happens when art crosses the line into complete monstrosity. Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. This is actually one of my favorite books of all time. It is gothic perfection, moving a little bit more into gothic, less into horror, but it's about a young, naive woman who marries a mysterious widower, and she moves into his estate, Manderley. But once she arrives, she realizes that she can't escape the shadow of his dead ex-wife, Rebecca. So everyone in the house, especially this like sinister housekeeper, seems to worship her memory. And I think what's so brilliant about Rebecca is how psychological the horror is. There are no ghosts, but it feels very haunted, you know, by jealousy and insecurity and by the idea that you can never live up to someone else's ideal. And I think, you know, Daphne du Maurier really builds this slow, like creeping tension that never fully lets go throughout the whole story. It's very atmospheric. The prose are stunning. They're lush, beautiful, gothic. This is an incredible experience of a read. Okay, and The Monk by Matthew Lewis is one of the wildest gothic novels ever written. So think sex, demons, nuns, corruption, damnation. Yeah, it kind of has it all. The story follows Ambrosio, who is supposedly a virtuous monk who slowly succumbs to temptation. He falls in love, breaks his vows, commits terrible crimes, and ends up spiraling into something truly monstrous. And I think what's fascinating is how modern it feels in its depiction of hypocrisy and repression. Yeah. Matthew Lewis also wrote this book when he was 19 years old, and it caused a massive scandal when it came out. It's just very campy and over the top and just deeply blasphemous in the best way. Okay, next we have the Oxford Book of Victorian Ghost Stories, which is an anthology, like a collection of some of the best ghost stories that are ever written during the Victorian era, when like death and mourning and the supernatural were basically pop culture at the time. So you'll find stories from writers like M.R. James and Elizabeth Gaskell and Charles Dickens, all really exploring what it meant to be haunted in an age that was so obsessed with reason. So the ghosts here aren't just scary, they're moral and melancholic. Sometimes they're even romantic, and I think what's chilling is how restrained the horror in this book feels. Everything just feels like half whispered, half seen, left to your imagination, and it's just the perfect thing to read by candlelight while it's raining outside, and it just feels very atmospheric and Halloween-y. I think I just lucked out with the best covers that I have here, like for Perfume, for house of psychotic women. Like, I don't know. This cover is terrible. But this, another like favorite cover. I'm obsessed. Okay, so moving into horror cinema, there were so many to choose from, and I just wanted to pick a few so that I didn't make you feel overwhelmed with the abundance of choice. I tend to like older classic horror films, especially like black and white films and things like that, but I've included some that are more recent, mostly older though, like before the 80s. So hopefully you like this kind of like horror genre as well, but let me tell you about some of my favorites. So the first one is Suspiria, and this is like watching a nightmare that is painted in Technicolor. It follows a young ballerina who transfers to this prestigious dance academy in Germany, and then she finds out that it's run by this coven of witches. And the plot almost doesn't matter in this film. It's really about like the color and the hysteria and the sound, and the lighting is, it like bleeds red and blue, and the soundtrack is incredible too. It just, I don't know, it feels like a horror film, like opera adjacent. It's very feminine, very occult, and just impossibly beautiful. Next one is Psycho from 1960, which I think changed the genre of horror forever. It really started out as this crime thriller where a woman steals money and checks into this remote motel, but halfway through the story takes a very violent turn. And I think that like, especially Anthony Perkins' performance in this film as Norman Bates is still one of the most unnerving portrayals of loneliness and delusion that has ever been filmed. So I don't know, everything about Psycho, the shower scene, the violins, and even like the house on the hill, like I feel like these all kind of became part of horror's DNA. Next is Eyes Without a Face from 1960, which is a French horror film, and it is very haunting in the most literal way. It's about a surgeon who kidnaps a young woman to remove their faces and graft them into this like disfigured daughter, basically. It sounds very grotesque, but the movie is oddly poetic in a way. It's full of white masks and surgical precision and the eerie calm of guilt. And it's less about core, but it is very much about obsession and beauty and I don't know, what it means to love someone and what it means to love someone so much to actually destroy them. Okay, House from 1977 is one of my favorite horror films of all time. It's a Japanese horror that really feels like being trapped inside of a fever dream. It's about a group of schoolgirls who go to a haunted house for summer vacation, and the house is possessed and hungry and obsessed and absurd, and it just devours them one by one. But instead of like the traditional horror, it's full of surreal visual gags and flying heads and blood geysers and piano keys that bite. It's very chaotic and unsettling, but it's also just kind of hilarious and like Looney Tunes possessed by a demon. Speaking of possessed, my next film, one of my favorites of all time, is Possession from 1981. It is a psychological horror that is pushed to its absolute breaking point. It's about a woman named Isabel who gives like one of the most intense performances ever captured on film. She plays a woman who is completely unraveling in the midst of this divorce, and her breakdown is somehow tied to this like supernatural entity. It's part domestic drama, part body horror, part metaphysical meltdown. The whole film very much feels like an exorcism of love itself, love as disease, love as madness, love as something completely unholy. Next is The Shining with Shelley Duvall, my beloved. This takes Stephen King's haunted hotel story and turns it into something very cold and cerebral and claustrophobic. And I don't know, Jack Nicholson's descent into madness as Jack, as like a writer and a husband and eventual killer, is so terrifying and oddly hypnotic in a way. Just the geometry of the Overlook Hotel and the blood-filled elevators and the twins in the hallway, it's all so meticulously designed to make you feel trapped inside of someone else's psychosis. And it's less about like ghosts than the horror of isolation and the male ego completely unraveling. Okay, last three. The Night of the Hunter from 1955 is about a guy who plays this preacher with love and hate tattooed on his knuckles, and he haunts two children for their dead father's money. And it's very much like shot like a fairy tale, but it turns into a nightmare very quickly. Each frame feels very biblical, and it's all just shadows and dread and existential, and it's about how evil hides behind righteousness. Next is Cat People from 1942, which is about a woman who believes that she'll turn into a panther if aroused. It's very gothic and erotic and restrained, and it's just, I don't know, the pool, if you watch it, the pool scene, and I don't know, it's still like, I think one of horror's most brilliant moments is that scene in the pool. But anyways, it's about repression and desire and fear, all circling around each other in the dark. Last one is The Innocents from 1961, which is based on the turn of the screw, where a governess suspects that the children in her care are possessed, or maybe she's losing her mind. The film never tells you, but it's all candlelight and mist and horror as this like psychological unraveling. Bonus one for me is The Heathers, which is not horror, but it is quite gothic and Halloween inspired. Anything with Winona, Edward Scissorhands, just all of Winona's films I recommend for this season, and also just any season really, but specifically right before Halloween. Okay, last part of this video, I want to talk about some perfumes to wear for Halloween, and it feels like the perfect season to wear something that's spooky and creepy and witchy, and something that will kind of help you remember this season. Okay, Blood Spider Orchids from Regime de Fleur smells like candlelight and velvet and old wood. It's very warm and spicy. There's cinnamon, clove, incense, but it's softened by tonka bean, and it just never feels too heavy. It's like walking through a gothic library with candles burning low, and it's dark and it's elegant and it's a little unholy, but it is very wearable. You can wear this all season, but it just feels particularly perfect for Halloween. Snow Moon Magic is probably my favorite gourmand of all time, at least one of them, and it just smells like baking something sweet at midnight. There's vanilla and marshmallow and chai. It's very cozy and sugary, and it just, I don't know, it feels like cookie dough and milk with a touch of spice, and it's very flirty and soft and like the perfect bedtime scent. But specifically for this season, this is like a cottage witch bakery. Relique d'Amour by Arisa Legrand smells like an abandoned ghostly chapel after the rain. There's pine, incense, lily, cold stone. It's very ghostly and quiet and beautiful. It just reminds me of like candle wax and myrrh drifting through an abandoned church. It's very spiritual and eerie, and it's the perfect haunted scent. I always tell people that this kind of feels like the inverse of a perfume. Like, I think truly, if a ghost had a scent, it would be this perfume. This is like one of my favorite, like eerie, ethereal, ghostly perfumes of all time. I would be completely remiss if I did a Halloween perfume video and didn't mention Coven by Andrea Mack. This smells like a forest after a storm. There's wet moss, cedar, oak moss, clove. It's very green and earthy and grounding, but it still feels very clean and modern and very like witch in the woods type of vibe. I don't know, it just smells like nature and a hedge witch maybe. I forgot to grab this bottle from my perfume cabinet, but Chocolate Greedy by Montal is the perfect candy bar chocolate. Actually, I think it's one of the best chocolate perfumes of all time. It smells like a cafe mocha turned into a perfume. There's cocoa, vanilla, coffee, orange peel. It's sweet, but it's not syrupy. It's cozy, but it's still grown up, and it just kind of reminds me of brownie batter in a cashmere sweater. It's very warm and comforting and addictive. Okay, Lune Filine by Atelier d'Or smells like gold and smoke and skin. There's cinnamon, cardamom, vanilla, amber. It's very sweet and spicy, but musky animalic. It just feels alive. It's very sensual. The dry down of this perfume is stunning. The opening I didn't like on my skin, but when I let it dry down, I could not stop smelling myself all day. It's delicious. I can't go a day without recommending this scent, which is Portrait of a Lady by Frederic Malle. This is like the ultimate femme fatale fragrance. It's like rose, clove, raspberry, cardamom, cinnamon. It is so like, it's so sensual and addictive and intoxicating. I don't know. I think it also just smells so different on everybody, but I love this scent. It's like if you're a vampire this year for Halloween, wear this one, or a witch too.